Peace, everyone. In the first video, I mentioned something about a past life, and I imagine that may be something that uh, some people are curious about. I know that when people hear that sort of thing, they automatically think somebody's going to claim to be Cleopatra or Prophet Elijah or some kind of luminary like that, when in reality, my claim is that I was dark complexion New Jersey maid in my past life, and that I was associated with the peace mission. I feel that she was somebody who was probably named Joy. That word came up early in this life in a past life reading from someone that I respected who did seem to have real insight into those things. And the word joy uh, was a recurrent theme there. They interpreted it as a life theme for this life, but also gave the association of a hummingbird, and that has recurred synchronously many times in my life. The word joy and the image of a hummingbird. So I think this sister was a member of the peace mission in the 30s and 40s, and I think that she probably passed sometime in the early 1940s. Shortly after Mother Divine in the first body threw off that body. I don't think Joy was her first name. I think it was a part of her name, but I don't have incredible recall of the life or the location or the full name of the person. But she was heavy-set, dark-complexioned person, and she was in the orbit of Father Divine. And I believe that she was especially close to Mother in the first body, Mother Penina, expressing the Divine Mother. And I think that when Mother withdrew into seclusion, this person that I'll call Miss Joy didn't understand it and felt very heartbroken. And I have even in this life met one person, two people actually, who knew Mother in the first body when they were very young children, or really, and they had a similar experience. Mother withdrew to seclusion at the Tarrytown estate, and that's where she passed in January 1943, before the divine spirit, the divine archetype, found another willing body in Sweet Angel, who was completely selfless and brought forth the exact same spirit, Mother Divine. Well, I felt in that life that there was great injustice somehow, and I didn't understand things, and I didn't get the answers that I want, and I felt excluded. I felt that I had been close to Mother, and then when the end of that bodily manifestation came, I didn't know anything about it. I think I learned about it from a newspaper or something like that, and it was disturbing to me. But you see, this is a story of Father Divine bringing great justice, because in this life, in the last 4 years, the last presidential term of Mother Divine in the second body, I was privileged to be near her and to have all of the experience that I felt that I was cheated of in the previous life. Indeed, to be holding her hand in the last moments of her bodily manifestation, where I felt Miss Joy would have liked to have been back then in 1943, and just didn't have the understanding or the opportunity to do that. But Father made justice, you see, and also gave me the great lesson that I'm not this body. I am a spirit that is manifesting this body. This body is a gift, but also is a projection of my own level of understanding. And I'm not a race, not a creed, not a gender. And my connection to God, to Spirit, is something that doesn't depend on those things, and also doesn't depend on the mortal authorities that would keep you from the body, because the Spirit is everywhere. And Mother was probably trying to teach Miss Joy that lesson, and indeed to teach the whole peace mission that lesson when she threw off that body. But it didn't take with everybody. And this is a testimony that takes multiple lives and I believe indeed many, 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 many lives, to return to God or to have the privilege of being near a Holy One like Mother. Even in this life, you see, I have here is precious token to me, one of the most precious things I have, the hair of Mother in the second body, just a little clipping of her hair. And that's such a wonderful thing to have with me, and especially if you consider the belief that in the past it was something that caused great pain, that I didn't have these things. But Father is a perfectly just God, and people may not believe that, and they may deny it, but I believe, and I believe across the evidence of more than one life, that it is true. Thank you, Father and Mother Divine, for that body and this body, and thank you for the understanding you are awakening in all of us. Peace. Peace, everyone. A little later, and I just want to add a few more thoughts about the reincarnation theme. Reincarnation is something that I have believed in since childhood, and interestingly, I also remember being a child and arguing with adults about the feasibility of bodily immortality. For example, insisting quite forcefully with an aunt around the age of perhaps 9 that what did she know? Perhaps she could be the first person who would live forever. And in retrospect, I believe that might be a residual impact. That kind of thinking in childhood may be a residual impact of the previous contact with Father Divine. And I think the belief in reincarnation would have come from Father, but I also believe that I was remembering past lives before that in a sort of spotty way. I mean, you get the parts that are meaningful, that are archetypal, that are resonant, that you're carrying forward into the present life. You can remember those, I think, and you can remember very, very strong impressions from previous lives. And I think that immediately before Miss Choi's life, I was someone in India, in Maharashtra, which I have visited in this life. And I believe that somehow in that life I had the grace to make some kind of contact. I don't claim to be a disciple or any kind of major contact, but some kind of contact and some kind of grace with Shirdi Sai Nath. And I think that I went to India for one reason, but I think the actual reason was to visit his shrine in Shirdi. I think perhaps I was an Englishman who had some kind of contact with Shirdi Sai, and I think that he sent my spirit to New York. And someday I'll talk more about that and the connection to Meher Baba. And I think, though, I don't think I met Meher Baba, but I think I did meet Sai, and Shirdi Sai, the real Sai, and that I also met, or saw at least, Hazrat Babajan. And I think those two exalted beings saw me. I don't claim any special exalted connection with them. I do not believe that I lived with them or studied with them for any length of time at all, but I do believe that there was some kind of incidental contact, and I may have had some sort of conviction from Sai about his identity. So I think that was the background of my spirit, of my soul. And I think those two lives have always had some kind of close to the surface resonance for me, and have always been precipitating factors in the personality that I am in this life from those past impressions. Memories of Babajan and this current pastime with Mother Divine came together one day very much to my surprise, when I was walking past the porch of the Woodmont house toward the shrine, and Mother Divine, as she often did in those days, was sitting on the porch with a sister. But Mother was, it was a cool autumn day, I believe, and she was covered in a red and white striped blanket, and her white hair was there. Perfect picture of Hazrat Babajan, and the images of them just instantly merged in that experience. I think it's very important to say that that desire that I had to be with Mother Divine in the first body, when she was throwing off that body, was fulfilled and also signified. Something that I didn't mention in the first half was that when we were with Mother in the second body on March the 4th, 2017, and she was, the night before, singing to her, and then on March the 4th, being with her as she was throwing off the body, there were several times when singing to her that I incidentally saw Mother in the first body, in the mirror on the wall beside Mother. This little room in which this tremendous event happened was somewhat strange. It was a mirrored dressing room to the side of Mother's regular bedroom, which she always shared all her life with another sister, like all the other followers. But off from it there was this little mirrored dressing room, and all around, every wall was mirrored. And so it was in this little, it was like, an infinity chamber, because mirrors reflect mirrors, and a very unusual space, but I think somehow a very significant space for this most sacred event to happen. But several times during the night before, when we were all gathered and singing to Mother, and knowing that the transition was approaching sometime soon, Mother was still conscious and present. That was the last day she had opened her eyes. She did not open her eyes that night before, but she was conscious. She smiled for us and nodded, and she did understand that we were there. And we sang for quite some time, and I caught glimpses multiple times in the mirror of Mother Panina, Mother in the first body, where the reflection of Mother in the second body should be. And then on the day, March the 4th, the hour and a half before Mother threw off the body and the hour and a half after, I was kneeling beside her bed, holding her left hand without break, with my conscious intention entirely focused on her, to the total exclusion of everything else. But during that time, every time I looked to my left, toward that mirror, I saw Mother Panina consistently. And to me, this was a great sign and testimony of the oneness of the Divine Mother Spirit that has shown itself so wonderfully in Mother in the first body and Mother in the second. Truly extraordinary phenomena, unrecorded in American religion. But I also was there, I believe, because of the personal karma or the personal impressions from the past life. And as a teaching demonstration to me, to my spirit, about who Father Divine is, and that he does indeed fulfill his promises, and that I am not a race, creed, color, or religion, and that not a nationality, not a gender, that I am a spirit soul above all of those things, and that the body, those things and the body, are like garments that we put on, or masks that we wear for a masquerade, knowing that within us we are pure spirit soul, and within that pure spirit soul, the core of that is only God. And this is something that I feel is alive in me, as not simply as a matter of belief, but because it is something that I have come through as a conscious being, and probably many more times in the past that I don't remember, that are sort of wrapped up and encapsulated in this one special memory, because it is relevant to what I have lived in this life, and also I think to what I'm doing now, and the kind of sharing that I hope to be able to do for the rest of my life, just as an individual, talking about the richness of lived experience with Father and Mother Divine, for me, from a metaphysical and universalist context. I was also blessed to be able to have a tour of the Promised Land properties with the local historian there, who was able to provide a great amount of detail about each of those properties over a 2-day period. And there were a couple of places that I had very strong impressions of. One of them, the strongest of all, was Samsonville, Cup of the Mountains. This property I immediately recognized. It immediately felt sacred to me. I immediately knew I have been here before. This was a place where a small number of followers attempted to have an agricultural commune. And it did succeed for a few years, but over the long haul, the Promised Land properties were not economically successful, and most of those people ended up moving to Philadelphia after some time. But I think that that Miss Joy never did move to Philadelphia. I don't think that she would have lived in the Promised Land all this time, but perhaps she did. Mother in the first body was very active in the Promised Land experiments, and that may have been where Miss Joy met her in person and developed this strong attachment to her that transcended lives. But the Samsonville property was very, very familiar, and the barn in which Father was said to be transfigured was very, very familiar. And interestingly, in this life, I was born in a place that geographically looks very, very much like Samsonville. And so that was a profound experience. And the first time that I visited Sayville, I had the feeling that I had been there before. And I do believe that Miss Joy was there before. Now, I should say, in talking about past lives, I believe really we're talking about something that happens outside of time. We have a sequence of lives in mind that are chronological and evolutionary and developmental. And that is true in a sense. We do pass through those degrees of biological and then spiritual evolution. We come up through the species, one after the other, and then we pass through as many human lives as it takes to harmonize thoroughly with God. and to become completely indistinguishable from our divine source through the mitigation or the undermining of the false self, the little self that imagines since Eden that it is other than God. So we're really talking about something that once we get to the final goal, we realize that we're not just that sequence of lives that we thought we passed through, but we're all lives in all time and space, because it is only the one I am that we come to be that has done all these things and enacted all of these roles. So ultimately, all experience is our experience. And we are personally, through consciousness, really connected to everything and everyone. But we are not experiencing that here in linear perception, in linear time. And it is partly that reason that we have relationships with God in human form, that we seek out either the illumined human being who has become one with God, or blessing of all blessings, the incarnation of God, God's self. And I have unusually crisp, clear, strong visual impressions of just a handful of people. Spiritual figures, Father Divine, Mother Divine, Shirdi Sainath, Hazrat Babajan. Those images are alive in me as though I had just seen them. They're something that is inexpressible in the clarity, in the kind of etching onto my mind. And I personally feel that that's because of the identification of light with spirit and with the subtle physical realm that interpenetrates this one. Not a heaven that's afar off, but a realm of light that is the basis, the substrate, the realer real of this one, in which spiritual figures have continuing existence. And that that substrate of light, that spiritual light, is something very real and very palpable. And it was really something that I perceived when I first met Mother Divine. Read this part so that I get it right. Someday, not in this video, I will talk about my experience of Mother Divine as the Queen of Heaven, and how I was prepared in previous mythic and metaphysical training to play a certain ritual, energetic role in Mother's great day. Suffice it here to say that I experienced myself as a sort of grounding wire as I held Mother's hand in the last hour of her embodiment, and that I was able to be of service to her in the unimaginable work of throwing off the body and entering the universal, ever-present light of which we are all formed. It's relatively easy to explain feeling the extraordinary currents fill the space in which that event happened and passed through me. I'm sure if others present were sensitive, they were also feeling the Spirit move in this powerful, sublime, and unfamiliar way. It's far more complicated. It's far more complicated and foreign to many to explain how I was trained to do such a thing and to recognize it for what it was. And that background will evolve in future personal autobiography videos. But the grounding wire metaphor is apt. When I first saw Mother through the doors of Woodmont, passing just as I approached, I perceived her become a flash of lightning and fill all space. My hand was on the knob, but I had to turn back from the door and walk around for a moment to collect myself before I could enter. Before I ever spoke to Mother personally, I directly perceived something of her true nature in a way that was incontrovertible to me. And she continued to glow supernaturally to my perception throughout the banquet, the 3 or 4 hour banquet that followed, really delivering conviction to me. I already came with full conviction about Father Divine, but as I hadn't met her and she was still in the body, I always wondered, and it was confirmed at first sight. It was memory and love at first sight, and that impression from the past discharged in me like a flash of lightning and woke me to who she was, to who she is. Father himself had been called Lightning in the 19-teens before many knew his name, and he was also called John Friend in at least one incident in those years. And it has long been said Father Divine is a live wire, like an electrical wire. Mother shares the same light essence, the same kind of true body as that described in Revelation for intensely heated metal, the glorified body of Christ described in Revelation as blinding, like the kind of light that comes from something that is molten to the highest degree. Or the light of 1,000 suns. Mother shares the same light essence, the same kind of true body as that described in Revelation, where it talks about the glorified body of Christ, where the metaphor is of metal that has been heated to a fierce white-hot heat like the sun. Not this so-called white of this complexion, but a glorified body that is composed of light. And I feel that that's what this subtle physical realm is, and I feel that that is where Father and Mother are primarily situated today. It is not a heaven in the sky. It is an interpenetrating realm that is right here, and some beings, at least, Father and Mother certainly, have the power to step in and out of that realm. It's like the light of many suns. It's like the light of an atomic explosion, something of that nature. Once I told a sister that I perceived the golden light that surrounded Mother all the time, and she mentioned it to Mother at tea once, and Mother said, "Well, I'm glad you can see the I'm glad you can see the light. It is very significant." And after a pause, she said, "Well, I did come from Father, you know." And I answered, full of love, "Yes, Mother, I do know." To me, after 7 years of preparation before ever visiting or meeting any member, the truth was not a matter of words alone, but something visually apparent, something that was clearly signified as a different order of being. To me, the deity of Father and Mother is something I've plainly seen and continue to see. Ears to hear and eyes to see are not mere metaphors. They are literal sensory abilities born of spiritual preparation, born of cultivation of the right sort of spiritual impressions, and tailored to one's individual destiny or dharma.
As with the fact that the deeper meaning of parables is closed to those unprepared to receive the meaning, so too is the skill set we individually need for our particular role in God's work in time and space. Father once spoke about his cabinet as being sort of spiritual, metaphysical chess pieces through which he operated. And I believe that his cabinet was effective through March the 4th. And I think that the spiritual role that I talked about there and some of the preservation work at a transitional time was something that I had been prepared for in the previous life, and that for a brief time, perhaps a 4-year period, I did participate in that one term in that cabinet. And then on March the 4th, Father dissolved that cabinet completely. And the function of the embodied 144,000 who were with him no longer functional in that sense in this world. There is an invisible spiritual hierarchy, and perhaps 144,000 is the number of those people. When I say invisible, I mean not in the phone book. I don't mean ghostly. I mean they are somewhere on the earth, and they occupy spiritual stations in the administration of God's government, as it were, on earth. But it's not a matter of force, and it's not a matter of secret societies or magicians or that level of things. It's at a resonant level. It's a matter of, we being all connected at the ultimate level to every other particle in creation. And what we think and do and experience has a resonant influence and does either uplift or bring down the whole. And so we all have a different role, but there are those people who have some sort of special role in the mind of God as it is manifesting collectively for all of us. And I'm not saying that I'm one of those people. I'm saying that I had this one particular function in this organization for a brief time, and it passed from me as it passed from manifestation with the body of Mother Divine. So I really do think that that is something I experienced. And he also spoke of reincarnation, that God gives the soul a body as it pleases God, in the context, for the purpose that it pleases God. And everyone has the privilege to discover that. But not everyone is awake to their role within God's mind and God's expression. And we can become, if we choose, more awake to that. But Father spoke of 42 degrees, 42 generations of preparation for the manifestation of the Christ historically in Nazareth. 42 generations, I believe, calculated from Adam, but perhaps that's from Abraham or Sinai. But 42 generations of preparation for this one particular personal manifestation of such great historical importance. And so it takes 42 generations to create and arrange the impressions that make for the incarnation of Jesus and the cultural acceptance of Jesus to the extent that he was accepted. And it has taken an intervening number of generations, whatever those are, between Jesus and Father, or perhaps between Muhammad and Father, because Father did say that Muhammad was an incarnation, of preparing for this manifestation, this ADFD dispensation, and many little pieces. And all I'm claiming is that I was one of those little pieces, and I'm very blessed to say that it was March the 4th. And for me it was restorative justice, giving me something that the soul had missed in a previous life, in a way that just makes me happy for as long as I'm going to exist. And I do believe that if the day comes when I put aside this body, it will be Mother Divine who comes to me and who reciprocates to me by holding my hand as I transition. When she threw off the body, I perceived a great shift in light. I perceived her light merge with this great field of light. And I was kind of like a grounding wire as that happened. And the rest of that day and the next day, and I think about 9 days at Woodmont, were just especially permeated with this light and with such an extraordinary sense of grace and beauty and harmony. And there seemed to be such profound shifts at every level of reality in response to this great event. There seemed to be a response in nature, and, well, I think it was one of the holiest events, one of the most significant events in the history of the human species, and an evolutionarily critical moment, I think. When I say that we have many, many lives, I think that, in fact, if you're a human being on the earth today, that means that your spirit is probably older than the earth itself. We probably began the evolutionary journey toward God from nothing to everything. We probably began it. The earth is supposed to be around 4 billion years old. We probably began our journey in consciousness before the earth was formed. So that's a profound thought, but in the vast infinity of God's consciousness, such a span of time would be no different than a second. And ultimately, it's a kind of illusion. It is real in its time and scope, and it is doing a kind of divinizing work, a kind of alchemy on each and every one of us. And none of us are going to be lost. None of us are lost to God. God would cease to be infinite if that were the case. But we do make it back to God. And I feel that Mother is a contemporary illustration, perfect illustration of how that is done. And I feel like I witnessed her merge completely with the all, with the infinite impersonal Godhead from which Father and she personified themselves. And since then I feel them in every form of light. Well, I've spoken more about this than I intended and shared more than I intended, and we'll visit this in editing to determine what to post. But I thank you, and I thank Father and Mother Divine for these experiences and the privilege of bearing witness to them.